Hey everyone, it's Bill here again with part 18 of my Piano for Beginners tutorial course, and today we're going to be learning a new piece, and it's a really famous one, or at least it's an extract from a really famous one. Klavierstück in A-Moll, or Piano Piece in A minor as we would say in English, by Beethoven, more commonly known by its dedication, Für Elise. Before we look at Für Elise, a little bit of an advertisement for you. I've recently been interviewed by the guys at musicu.com for their musicality podcast. Now, if you can stick listening to a whole hour of me talking about piano practice, how to learn the piano, how to learn as an older beginner, which I know many of you guys are, about creativity, about my background in music, how I learned all this stuff, then go and listen to that podcast. I'll include a link in the description text underneath this video, and also in this tutorial's accompanying PDF. So if you're interested in that kind of thing, do go and have a listen. Okay, so let's get cracking with Für Elise. As I always say, if you're really new to the series and you hear me talking about things that you don't understand, like note lengths or dynamics or time signatures, stuff like that, then you probably need to look at some of the tutorials earlier in the series. I will, as usual, add a link to the playlist underneath this video. Right, let's get cracking. First of all, let's just play through this thing to see how it sounds. Now, the score that I've prepared for you, and which you can find in the PDF, again, the link's below this video if you haven't got that yet, is just the first 24 bars, the first 24 measures of the full version of Für Elise, kind of with an ending tacked onto it. Now, if you want to learn the whole thing, the full version, that would be amazing, and I'll tell you where to find the score later. But for today, we're just going to be focusing on those 24 bars. So here we go. First of all, I'm going to play it with the score on screen. I should say, by the way, there are a couple of repeat marks here. First of all, after bar 8 and then again at the end. But I'll be talking about those later and how they affect the structure of the piece. First of all, let's just play through. Okay, now let's take the score down and play it so that you can see my hands. Okay, so let's have a little think about what's going on there. You'll remember that a few tutorials ago we did Minuet in G, that little piece by Bach and or Petzold, which was quite a little bit of a challenge for you. Now, Für Elise is from a very different era of music. It was written in 1810, which is about a century after Minuet in G. It's actually of a similar level of difficulty to Minuet in G, maybe a little bit harder, but not much. But the challenges it presents are actually very different. So let's have a look at the score as we usually do and see exactly what's going on. So here we are at the top of the piece, and first of all let's think about the key signature, and there isn't one. There are no sharps or flats here. We've got some accidentals but no sharps or flats in the key signature. Straight away that tells us we are either in C major or A minor, and we know it's A minor first of all because Beethoven is good enough to tell us in the title, okay, but also because the character of the piece is very much that of a minor key piece of music. Although we do go into C major from bar 9 onwards, okay, so there is a short section in C major before the A minor returns, but the key is fairly straightforward and easy to work out. I just want to spend a little bit of time though talking about the time signature 3/8, which we haven't seen before, and this tempo direction poco molto, which is a little bit mysterious, a little bit hard to interpret, but we'll come on to that in a second. First of all, this time signature. Now, we know that 3/4 time is 3 crotchet, 3 quarter note beats per bar. So, as you can probably work out, 3/8 is just 3 quaver beats, 3 eighth note beats per bar. Now, what difference does that make? In some ways, not a lot. For a start, it doesn't necessarily mean that the piece is twice as fast as it would be if it were in 3/4 time, because a slow 3/8 beat could in principle be slower than a 3/4 beat taken at a relatively fast pace. However, by writing Für Elise in 3/8 time, it seems to me that Beethoven is kind of sending us a message. Yeah, he's maybe telling us that he wants a feeling that's a little lighter, a little bit more nimble than a 3/4 beat. Okay, 3/4 can be a bit kind of 1 2 3 1. It can be a bit ponderous, a bit plodding. So 3/8 is a time signature that tells us as much about the character of the piece as about its beat and tempo, yeah? And that's something you kind of need to get used to. Composers often choose, for example, 3/8 when they could have used 3/4, or 2/2 when they could have used 4/4, to say what kind of piece it is that they've tried to write. Certainly, I wouldn't take it too quickly. It's not a piece to hang about with, so when I was playing it through, you'll have noticed that I wasn't hanging about. It was at a reasonable pace, but you don't want to rush it either. And the tempo marking, poco molto, seems to back that up. Now, if you Google around, you'll probably find that poco molto is very uncommon as a tempo marking, and if you do Google it, you'll usually find it discussed in the context of Für Elise, okay, but partly because the piece is so famous. It literally means just little movement, okay, and nobody even really seems to know whether it's Beethoven's marking or whether the first editor of the piece added it, okay. A bit unsure there. I suspect it's Beethoven's because it's so, Beethoven was given to being a bit mysterious sometimes. It sounds a bit like him, yeah. Most people seem to interpret it as meaning keep moving, don't hang about, but not too fast. Sometimes you'll see it marked andantino, a little bit quicker than andante, okay. I would also take it to mean don't get too carried away with rhythmic expression. Pull around the tempo a little bit, maybe. I certainly did. It doesn't want to be a really rigid number of beats per minute. You wouldn't want to play it exactly against the metronome, but the whole thing should be relatively tight and restrained, and that kind of fits the feel of the piece. There's an underlying intensity to it, yeah, and you want to keep that intensity up rather than going bananas with lots of really kind of over the top expression. Now let's have a look at some of the stuff that you're going to need to deal with as you play through the piece. First of all, I want to make sure that you're getting these repeat marks right. Okay, we've got one here at the end of bar 8 and we've got one right at the end. And each time there's a repeat mark, there's a first and second time bar. So the first time you play this section through, you play that bar, and then the second time you skip that bar and go to the second time bar. Let's just go through and make sure you know exactly what you're playing. Okay, so first section, We play all the way along here, all the way along here, all the way along here, to the first time bar, to the repeat mark. Notice, by the way, that this first time bar is a beat short. It's actually only got 2 beats in it. Okay, there are 2 quaver beats in there, and the reason for that is because it's compensating for this single beat pickup bar at the top, yeah, and it has to do that because there's a repeat there and you're going back to the pickup bar, so you need 1, 2, 3 beats just there. Okay, the second time bar has got 3 beats in it. So all the way through here, play the first time bar back to the start, but when you get back to the end of bar 7 for the second time, you go to the second time bar. Okay, and then we keep playing through, all the way to here, to the repeat marks, to the end of the first time bar, then back to here, not to the second time bar from the first section, but to this E. Yeah, you can see we've got the lead up there, B, C, D, E, so we're starting the repeat of this section there, and then all the way through, skip the first time bar and play the second time bar, and that is the end of the piece. Okay, so if you find that a bit confusing, probably the thing to do is to print out the score and follow it as you listen to my playthrough from earlier in the tutorial. Yeah, that way you can see the kind of the whole page at once and track where I am at any one time, and that'll help to give you a good sense of the structure of the piece as well. Now, one of the things you really need to do with Für Elise is pay close attention to the score, because it's quite famous and you might have heard it before, and when you're playing something famous, it's really important to make sure you're playing what the score says, okay, not what you think it says because you've got the tune in your head. And there are 1 or 2 kind of subtleties you need to spot. So, for example, in the C major section, which starts around here, okay, you'll see that the notes of at the end of each little phrase are held. Okay, they're dotted quavers, and that's in contrast to what's going on up here. Okay, where the notes at the end of each little phrase are just single quavers. The overall effect of that is not really dramatic. Okay, it doesn't make a lot of difference to the overall sound, because after all the pedal is holding all of these things anyway, but it should slightly affect the way that you play it. Yeah, I wasn't actually playing these in the performance. I wasn't playing these as full. I wasn't holding them down for the full length of a dotted quaver. But I was holding them just slightly more than I was the equivalent notes in the minor section. Okay, and again, it has just a little bit of an effect on the way you play it, and therefore on the sound. Yeah, what you need to be able to do is kind of not play it by a robot exactly, but like a robot, but kind of spot these subtle differences in the score and work out why they're there. Okay, and presumably the reason Beethoven gave us a slightly longer note there compared to there is that he wanted clearer sense of flowing line going through here. So here we've got something that's a little bit more bitty and broken up, whereas here it was a much more natural through line, and that's kind of what I was trying to do when I was playing through. The other big thing we've got going on is quite a lot of jumping around the keyboard. Now, a couple of minutes ago I said that Für Elise is of a similar level of difficulty to Minuet in G, which we looked at a couple of months ago, but the problems it presents are different, and this is exactly what I mean. In Minuet in G, we kind of had our work cut out, keeping everything held down that needed to be held down. We were dealing with 2 voices in one hand in a couple of places. Here we've got much more kind of fleeting touches on the keyboard, and our fingers are kind of flying about. Yeah, so your watchwords need to be legato, smooth and graceful. It needs to be elegant, it needs to be light. Don't let your fingers get really welded to the keys. To start with, obviously as you're working things out they will be, but as you get more confident with the piece, it needs to be quite light and quite graceful. It shouldn't be kind of wishy-washy and vaporous, yeah, but we're very much dancing over the keyboard rather than wrestling with it. With that in mind, the pedal markings are quite carefully designed to sustain the right things in the right places, so make sure you follow them. Now previously we've seen bracket type pedal markings, but here we've got the ped symbol with big asterisks for release. So at first glance it might seem surprising, some of the pedal choices. It might seem odd that there's no pedal in some bars but some in others, but again, that's deliberate. It's all in pursuit of particular effect. Yeah, so when you come to a ped symbol, right pedal goes down, sustain pedal goes down. When you come to an asterisk, it comes off. In terms of difficulty, it's not as hard as it looks. Okay, when you watch me play it, you might think, oh my word, this is quite a big step up from what we've been doing so far, but really it's not. Yeah, especially in the left hand, there are only actually one or two little patterns going on there, and once you've got them, that's your left hand sorted out. The one quite tricky bit is where you've got the E octave jumps from bar 12 onwards. Let me just play that bit, and I'll go from the major section a few bars beforehand. Here we go. Okay, so those big jumps up the keyboard. By the way, that top E is out of shot in the video. I just looked back at it and it's not there, but that's what it is. That very, very high note in bar 14 is an E, just like the E before it, but an octave higher. Then straight after those octaves, you're back to the D sharp and the E sharp, swapping around, first of all between the two hands, and then back to the start of the main theme. Now give that a bit of attention and make sure that you're playing the right number of notes, yeah, because it's quite easy to think, hold on, have I played too many D sharps and E's there? And practice it really slowly a few times, yeah? And if you need to, do check back on what I'm doing in the performance. Once you've got the whole thing up to a reasonable speed, double check you're not slowing down in this section, because the bit that comes before it isn't too difficult, but then suddenly you get this quite challenging bit. Okay, so really work on those few bars, and don't fear those jumps. Yeah, it's not actually super difficult, and you've got the pedal holding things together for you. You might wonder about the point of this swapping around of hands on the D sharp and E in bars 13 and 14. What's that all about? Why not just do it with fourth and fifth fingers in the right hand all the way through? And again, that's all about creating a slightly different, a slightly subtler effect, maybe creating a kind of a tiny sense of hesitation before things start again. Play it through, and once you've got it up to speed, you'll see what I mean. Okay, so give Für Elise a go and see how you get on. As I said, it's quite challenging, but it's also really good fun. Make sure you're always following the score carefully when you play, and not just copying what I do or copying any other performance you might find, yeah? Remember to be musical. It's a very intensely musical piece. Typical Beethoven, he's taking the most basic ideas and creating a kind of a whole musical world out of it. Yeah, there's not much going on in this piece, but Beethoven creates some very, very intense expression. So really make the most of that. Don't go overboard. Remember, poco moto, it's not supposed to be really kind of over the top and demonstrative. It's quite tight, it's quite subtle, but let the musicality, let the emotion ring through. If you really enjoy it, as I said, you could have a go at the whole thing. The whole piece should be kind of within your grasp at this stage, but you will find it really quite challenging. There's a middle section which is actually a little bit harder than what we've been working on here. But if you want to have a go, absolutely have a go at it. I'll include some links for finding the full score in the accompanying PDF. Okay, so that's kind of it for another tutorial. I hope you're enjoying it. As usual, questions, comments, give me a shout. You are more than at the stage now where you can get the most out of my book, How to Really Play the Piano, the stuff your teacher never taught you, which covers all the kind of jazz and blues and pop and improvisation and chords that I deal with elsewhere on the channel, so do go and check that out. Check out my Patreon crowdfunding campaign, patreon.com/Bill Hilton. If you can spare $1 or $2 per tutorial, that would be amazing. helps me free up time to work on these things. And as I always say, do follow me on Facebook and Twitter, and go and give that Musicality podcast a listen, because I really enjoyed doing it, and quite a few people seem to have enjoyed it from those who've listened so far. Again, the link's below. There we go. Off you go to the piano. Don't forget to do your scales, by the way. Mustn't forget your scales. Keep working on those, and I'll see you next time.